What would you do if something you despised, something you took for granted every single day, suddenly vanished from your life? Would you miss it? Would you finally understand what it truly meant? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below and tell us which city you're watching from. And if you believe that hope can be found in the most unexpected places, in the faces we overlook and the voices we silence, then subscribe to our channel so you don't miss what happens next. Because this story will change the way you see the world around you. At the iron gates of the most exclusive gated community in the city stood a woman who had everything. Amelia Hartford was draped in designer clothes that cost more than most people earned in a year. Her jewelry caught the afternoon sun and threw diamonds of light across the pristine sidewalk. Her face, smooth and unlined despite her 58 years, was a testament to the best cosmetic treatments money could buy. She was the picture of success, the embodiment of wealth and power. She had built an empire in real estate, turned empty lots into gleaming towers, transformed neighborhoods into profitable ventures. Her name opened doors. Her reputation commanded respect. But on this particular afternoon, as she stood at those gates preparing for her annual charity gala, Amelia Hartford was not thinking about her achievements. She was thinking about an embarrassment. She was thinking about him. Daniel sat on the pavement just outside the gates, exactly where he had sat for the past 20 years. He wore simple, clean clothes that somehow never seemed to wear out. His face was peaceful, serene even, with eyes that held depths most people couldn't bear to look into for long. He never asked for anything. He never held out a hand or called out to passers-by. He simply sat there day after day, year after year, a quiet presence that had become as much a part of the neighborhood as the oak trees and the lampposts. But there was something about Daniel that unsettled people, something that made them look away quickly and walk faster past him. Daniel never aged, not a single day. 20 years ago, when he first appeared, the residents assumed he was perhaps 30 years old. Now, 2 decades later, he still looked 30. Not a wrinkle had creased his face. Not a gray hair had appeared on his head. His eyes remained clear and bright. While the world around him aged and changed, while the trees grew taller and the children who once played nearby became adults with children of their own, Daniel remained exactly the same. Some said he was blessed. Others whispered he was cursed. Most simply chose not to think about it at all. But Amelia, standing at her gates on this crucial day, could think of nothing else. Her charity gala was in 3 hours. Photographers would arrive soon. Influential guests, politicians, celebrities, and business moguls would walk through these very gates. They would see the perfection she had created, the manicured gardens, the classical fountain, the rose bushes that had won awards at the state fair 3 years running. Everything had to be flawless. Everything had to reflect her success, her taste, her uncompromising standards. And then their eyes would fall on him. The beggar. The strange, ageless man sitting on the public sidewalk just beyond her property line. She had tolerated him for years, ignored him, pretended he didn't exist. But not today. Today, he was ruining everything. Amelia walked toward him, her heels clicking sharply against the pavement. Her assistant, a nervous young woman named Claire, followed a few steps behind, clutching a tablet and looking worried. Daniel didn't look up as Amelia approached. He sat with his back against the stone wall, his hands resting gently on his knees, his eyes closed as if in meditation or prayer. The sun painted golden patterns through the leaves above him. A slight breeze moved his hair. He looked, Amelia thought with irritation, entirely too comfortable. She stopped directly in front of him, blocking his sun. Her shadow fell across his peaceful face. Still, he didn't open his eyes. The disrespect of it, the audacity, made her anger flare even hotter. She was Amelia Hartford. People jumped when she spoke. Assistants scrambled at her slightest frown. Business rivals trembled at the mention of her name. And this man, this nobody, wouldn't even acknowledge her presence. "You need to leave," she said, her voice cold and sharp as winter ice. "Your presence here is an embarrassment. You're driving down property values. You're making my guests uncomfortable. Leave now and never come back." Slowly, Daniel opened his eyes. They were gray, the color of storm clouds over the ocean, and they looked at her with such profound sadness that for a brief moment Amelia felt something shift in her chest, but she pushed the feeling away. She had not built an empire by being soft. She had not clawed her way to the top by letting emotions cloud her judgment. She reached into her purse, pulled out a handful of bills, and threw them at him. The money fluttered through the air and landed around his feet like fallen leaves. A few coins clinked and rolled across the pavement. "Take it," she said. "Consider it your severance pay for haunting my neighborhood for 20 years. Now go." Daniel looked at the money scattered around him. He made no move to pick it up. Then he looked back at Amelia, and when he spoke, his voice was quiet but clear, with an odd resonance that seemed to echo in the spaces between heartbeats. "As you wish." He stood up slowly, gracefully, despite having sat in the same position for hours. He didn't gather the money. He simply looked at Amelia one last time with those ancient, sorrowful eyes, and then he walked away. He moved down the sidewalk with an easy, unhurried gait, and within moments he had turned the corner and disappeared from view. Amelia stood there for a moment, watching the empty space where he had been. She felt, just for an instant, a strange sense of loss, as if something important had just slipped through her fingers. But then Claire was at her elbow, reminding her about the caterers and the flower arrangements and the photographer's arrival time, and Amelia pushed the feeling aside. She had work to do. She had perfection to maintain. She turned back toward her mansion, walking through the gates into her private paradise. The gardens sprawled before her in all their glory. The roses, her pride and joy, bloomed in perfect rows, deep reds, pristine whites, delicate pinks, all at the peak of their beauty. She had spent years cultivating them, hired the best gardeners, used the most expensive fertilizers. They were scheduled to be featured in a lifestyle magazine next month. Everything was exactly as it should be, exactly as she had planned. But as Amelia walked past the first rose bed, she noticed something odd. One of the white roses, a particularly magnificent specimen that had opened just that morning, looked slightly wilted. The petals at the edges had begun to brown. She frowned and made a mental note to speak to the gardener. Perhaps the afternoon heat was too intense. Perhaps they needed more water. She continued up the stone path toward her house, dismissing the thought. The gala that evening was, by all accounts, a tremendous success. 200 guests filled her ballroom and spilled out onto the terraces. A string quartet played classical music. Champagne flowed. The silent auction raised $500,000 for the Children's Hospital, and Amelia's name would be prominently featured in the society pages the next day. She moved through the crowd with practiced grace, accepting compliments, making connections, cementing relationships that would benefit her business. She was in her element. This was what she did best. This was her kingdom, and she was its undisputed queen. But as the evening progressed, several guests mentioned the roses. "They're not quite as vibrant as I remember from last year," one woman said politely. "Are they past their peak?" Amelia made her way to the garden to see for herself. What she found made her blood run cold. The roses were dying, not slowly, not gradually, but at a rate that defied nature. The white roses she had admired that morning were now completely brown, their petals brittle and falling. The red roses had lost their color, fading to a sickly rust. Even the hardy yellow climbers that covered the garden arbor were wilting before her eyes. She watched, unable to believe what she was seeing, as a perfect pink bloom simply fell apart, its petals dropping to the ground like tears. "Get the gardener," she hissed at Claire. "Get him here now, I don't care what time it is." But the gardener, when he arrived 30 minutes later, was as baffled as everyone else. He examined the soil, checked the irrigation system, tested the pH levels. Everything was perfect. There was no disease, no pest infestation, no logical explanation for what was happening. "It's like they've just given up," he said, shaking his head in bewilderment. "Like something is drawing the life right out of them." Amelia ended the party early, claiming a sudden headache. As the last guests departed, making sympathetic noises and promising to keep in touch, she stood alone in her dying garden. The moon was full overhead, casting silver light across the destruction. Every single rosebush was dead or dying. 20 years of cultivation, of care, of pride, destroyed in a single evening. And somewhere in the back of her mind, in a place she didn't want to acknowledge, a small voice whispered, "This started when Daniel left." She dismissed the thought immediately. She was a rational woman. She dealt in facts, in figures, in tangible realities. The death of her roses was unfortunate, certainly, but it had nothing to do with a homeless man she had finally, rightfully, sent away. It was a coincidence, a strange and terrible coincidence, but nothing more. She went inside, took a sleeping pill, and forced herself to sleep. The next morning brought new troubles. Amelia woke early, as was her habit, and went downstairs to her home office. She liked to start her days reviewing contracts and financial reports over coffee, planning her next moves in the complex chess game of real estate development. But as she entered her office, she noticed something wrong. The antique grandfather clock that stood in the corner, a priceless piece that had belonged to her great-grandfather and had kept perfect time for over a century, had stopped. The hands were frozen at exactly 3:17. She walked over to it, opened the glass face and tried to restart the pendulum. It swung once, twice, and then stopped. The clock was silent, dead. Amelia felt a prickle of unease run down her spine. 2 impossibilities in less than 12 hours. But she forced herself to remain calm. Clocks broke. It was old. Perhaps something in the mechanism had finally worn out. She would call a specialist to repair it. Problem solved. She sat down at her desk and opened her laptop, determined to focus on work, on the solid, dependable world of numbers and negotiations. But throughout the day, small things continued to go wrong. Cracks appeared in the marble floor of her foyer, thin spiderweb lines that spread from the center of the room. The heating system malfunctioned, leaving half the house cold despite the thermostat settings. A painting fell from the wall in her bedroom, its frame splitting when it hit the ground. None of these things were catastrophic on their own, but together they created a pattern that Amelia couldn't ignore. Her perfect house, her sanctuary of control and order, was falling apart. The most disturbing moment came that evening. Amelia was in her bathroom preparing for bed when she looked up at her reflection in the mirror. What she saw made her gasp. The woman looking back at her was old. Not 58, but 78, maybe older. Deep wrinkles carved through her face. Her skin sagged. Her eyes were sunken and tired. Age spots covered her hands. She looked in that terrible moment like a woman who had lived a very long, very hard life. Amelia screamed and stumbled backward, her heart hammering in her chest. She squeezed her eyes shut, counted to 10 and looked again. Her reflection was normal. 58. Smooth-skinned, carefully maintained. The old woman was gone. Amelia's hands were shaking as she turned away from the mirror. She told herself it was stress, exhaustion, her mind playing tricks after the disaster of the gala. She took another sleeping pill and went to bed, but sleep brought no peace. She dreamed of Daniel's grey eyes, watching her with infinite sadness. She dreamed of roses turning to dust in her hands. She dreamed of time itself flowing like water, unstoppable and merciless. The following days brought no relief. In fact, things got worse, much worse. The problems that had started in her home began to spread to her business. A major development project, one that she had spent 3 years and millions of dollars planning, suddenly hit a wall. The financing fell through when one of her key investors unexpectedly withdrew. Then the city council, which had previously approved all her permits, suddenly found code violations in her plans. Environmental groups that had never paid attention to her projects before began protesting outside her office. Everything that could go wrong did go wrong, and all at once. But the real catastrophe came on a Tuesday morning. Amelia arrived at her office to find her entire legal team waiting for her with grim faces. An investigation had been launched into some of her company's practices from 15 years ago. Old deals, long forgotten, were suddenly under scrutiny. Someone had dug up documents, found irregularities, and reported them to the authorities. The investigation was all over the news. Her company's stock price plummeted. Clients began cancelling contracts. Partners distanced themselves. Everything she had built over 30 years was crumbling, and she was powerless to stop it. That night, alone in her office long after everyone else had gone home, Amelia finally admitted the truth to herself. This had all started the moment Daniel left. The roses, the clock, the cracks, the business disasters, all of it had begun the instant he walked away. She had tried to rationalize it, to find logical explanations, but there were none. Logic had failed her. Reality itself seemed to have shifted, and deep in her bones, in a place beyond reason, she knew that Daniel was not just a homeless man. He was something else, something she had foolishly, arrogantly driven away. She remembered her housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, who had worked for her for 20 years. The morning after Daniel left, Mrs. Chen had stood at the kitchen window, looking out at the empty spot by the gate, and said something strange. "It doesn't feel the same, does it, since he left? The neighborhood feels colder, emptier, like something important is missing." At the time, Amelia had dismissed the comment as sentimental nonsense, but now, sitting in the ruins of her empire, she understood. Daniel had not been taking something from this place. He had been giving something, and she had thrown it away. Amelia made a decision. She would find him. She would demand an explanation. She would make him undo whatever curse he had placed on her, because that's what this had to be, a curse. Punishment for her cruelty. She was Amelia Hartford, and she did not accept defeat. She did not surrender. If Daniel had done this to her, then Daniel could fix it. She just had to find him. The search took weeks. Amelia had never, in all her privileged life, set foot in the parts of the city where people like Daniel lived. She didn't know about the shelters or the soup kitchens or the missions that served the homeless. But she learned. She went to places she had previously only seen from her car window, if she saw them at all. She walked through neighborhoods her driver had always carefully avoided. She spoke to people she would have crossed the street to avoid a month ago. At first she tried to maintain her dignity, her distance. She would arrive at a shelter in her expensive car, wearing her designer clothes, and ask if anyone had seen Daniel. But the people there looked at her with suspicion or outright hostility. She was an outsider, an intruder from a different world. They gave her no information, so Amelia learned to adapt. She left the jewelry at home. She wore simple clothes. She started volunteering at a soup kitchen, serving meals, washing dishes, listening to stories. Slowly, people began to trust her. Slowly, they began to talk. Many people knew Daniel, or rather, they knew of him. The ageless one, they called him. The eternal watcher. He had been a fixture in the city for longer than anyone could remember. Some claimed to have seen him 30 years ago, looking exactly the same. Others said their parents had told stories about him from 50 years past. He moved through the city like a ghost, appearing and disappearing without pattern or warning. He never stayed in shelters. He never asked for help. He simply existed, a silent witness to the lives around him. One old woman, sitting on a bench in a small park where Amelia had been told Daniel sometimes visited, told her something that made Amelia's blood run cold. "He's not one of us," the woman said, her voice barely above a whisper. "He's something else, an angel maybe, or a spirit. He watches over certain people, certain places, but only as long as they deserve it. Once they prove they don't, well, he moves on, and when he does, time catches up, all at once. I've seen it happen before." Amelia wanted to dismiss the words as the ramblings of someone touched by too much hardship, but she couldn't, because she had seen it too. She had felt time catching up. Every morning when she looked in the mirror, she saw herself a little older. The expensive treatments that had kept her looking young were failing. Lines appeared around her eyes. Her skin lost its tightness. Her hair showed grey at the roots. She was aging at an accelerated rate, as if making up for lost time, and her business continued to collapse. Lawsuits piled up, investigations deepened, former allies became enemies. Everything she touched turned to dust. Finally, after 6 weeks of searching, Amelia found him. A worker at a riverside mission told her that a man matching Daniel's description had been seen sitting by the river early in the mornings. "Just before dawn," the man said. "He sits there watching the water until the sun comes up. Then he leaves." Amelia went to the river the next morning. She arrived in the darkness before dawn, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear, anger, and desperate hope. She didn't know what she would say to him. She didn't know what she would do. She only knew that she had to see him, had to understand what had happened, had to find a way to undo the destruction that was consuming her life. The river was quiet in the pre-dawn darkness. The city sounds were muted here, absorbed by the water and the trees that lined the banks. Mist rose from the surface of the river, creating ghostly patterns in the air, and there, sitting on a large flat rock near the water's edge, was Daniel. He looked exactly the same, exactly as he had looked 20 years ago, exactly as he had looked the day she had driven him away. His face was peaceful, his eyes were closed. He might have been sleeping, except that something about his stillness suggested he had moved beyond such ordinary needs. Amelia approached slowly, her feet crunching on the gravel path. Daniel didn't open his eyes. She stopped a few feet away from him, suddenly unsure. All the angry speeches she had prepared, all the demands and accusations died in her throat. Standing here in this quiet place, facing this strange, ageless being, her rage seemed small and pointless. She felt, for the first time in her adult life, completely powerless. "Why?" she finally managed to say. Her voice cracked. "Why did you do this to me?" Daniel opened his eyes, those grey eyes, deep as oceans, sad as winter. He looked at her, and Amelia felt as if he was seeing not just her face, but everything she had ever done, every choice she had ever made, every moment of cruelty and kindness in her entire life. She felt transparent, exposed, stripped of all the armor she had spent decades building. "I did nothing to you," he said softly. His voice was the same as she remembered, quiet but resonant, with that odd quality that made it seem to echo in her bones. "I simply stopped doing something for you." "I don't understand," Amelia said. Tears were running down her face now, hot and unchecked. She didn't even know she was crying until she tasted salt on her lips. "What did you do? What were you doing?" Daniel stood up slowly. He was not tall, but somehow he seemed to fill the space, to dominate it without effort. He turned to face her fully. "I have sat at your gates for 20 years, Amelia. I was not begging for your wealth. I never wanted your money or your charity. I was a gift, a shield against time, given because of a great kindness your grandmother once showed a lost traveler many, many years ago." Amelia's mind reeled. Her grandmother. She barely remembered the woman. She had died when Amelia was just a child. She had vague memories of a kind face, gentle hands, stories told by firelight. Her grandmother had not been wealthy. She had lived simply in a small house, working as a nurse. She had been, by all accounts, a good woman, the opposite of what Amelia had become. "What kindness," Amelia whispered. "What did she do?" "On a cold winter night, 70 years ago, your grandmother found a man collapsed in the snow outside the hospital where she worked. He was a stranger, a traveler from far away, with nothing and no one. She could have walked past. She was tired from a long shift. She had her own troubles. But she stopped. She brought him inside. She cared for him through the night, using her own money to pay for medicines the hospital would not provide for a stranger. She saved his life." Daniel's eyes were distant now, seeing across decades, across the vast gulf of time. That traveler was not what he seemed, and in gratitude for her kindness he made a promise that her family line would be protected, that they would be given time, shielded from the ravages of age, as long as they remained worthy of that gift. "I am the manifestation of that promise, Amelia. I am the shield. My presence near you held back your years. For 20 years you aged perhaps 5. While I sat at your gates, time moved slowly for you." The words hit Amelia like physical blows. She staggered backward, her hand reaching out to steady herself against a tree. It was impossible. It was insane. But it was also, she knew with absolute certainty, true. Every impossible thing that had happened, every detail that had made no sense suddenly clicked into place. The roses died because his protection was gone. The clock stopped because time was no longer being held back. Her reflection showed her true age because the shield had been withdrawn. And her business collapsed because the unnatural luck that had always favored her, the timing that had always been perfect, the opportunities that had always appeared exactly when needed, all of it had been part of the gift, and she had thrown it away. In her vanity and her cruelty, she had driven away the very thing that had made her success possible. "But I didn't know," she said desperately. "I didn't understand. If you had told me, if you had explained, I never would have—" "The gift was never about knowledge," Daniel interrupted gently. "It was about character. Your grandmother didn't help that traveler because she expected a reward. She helped him because it was right, because he was suffering, and she had the power to ease that suffering. The gift was given in hope that her descendants would carry that same kindness in their hearts, that they would be worthy of protection because they would use their time, their prosperity, to help others." He took a step closer to Amelia. His face was filled with such profound sadness that it hurt to look at. "For 20 years, I sat at your gates, Amelia. I was not just a shield, I was also a test. Every day you had the opportunity to see me, to acknowledge me, to show even the smallest kindness, a kind word, a moment of genuine concern, anything that would have demonstrated the compassion your grandmother possessed. But you never did. You walked past me as if I were invisible, and on the day when my presence became inconvenient to you, you didn't just ask me to leave, you humiliated me. You threw money at me as if I were less than human. You failed the test, Amelia, not once, but for 20 years, every single day, and so the gift is withdrawn. Please," Amelia begged. She fell to her knees on the gravel, her expensive clothes forgotten, her pride abandoned. "Please, I understand now. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I was wrong. I was cruel and selfish and blind, but I can change. I will change. Please, give me another chance. Let me prove that I can be better." Daniel looked down at her. For a moment, something like hope flickered in his ancient eyes, but then he shook his head sadly. The choice is not mine to make. I am merely the keeper of the promise, not its author. The shield is withdrawn. What happens now is up to you." "What do you mean?" Amelia asked, terror gripping her heart. "What's going to happen to me?" "You will live the years you were given," Daniel said simply. "No more, no less, but you will live them without the shield. Time will move for you as it moves for everyone else. The 20 years that passed slowly will not be erased, but the acceleration you have felt these past weeks will slow and stabilize. You have not been cursed, Amelia. You have simply lost a blessing you never knew you had. You will age naturally from this point forward. Your business, your wealth, your reputation, those are consequences of your own choices, not my doing. I protected you from time, not from yourself." He turned away from her, facing the river. The first light of dawn was beginning to break over the horizon, painting the water gold and rose. "There is one thing you should understand," he said quietly. "Your grandmother's kindness did not just earn a blessing for her family. It earned her a place in the memories of eternity. Her name is written in a book that will never be closed. Her compassion created ripples that spread far beyond her small life. You had the opportunity to add to that legacy, to honor her memory by living as she lived. Instead, you built monuments to yourself. You hoarded wealth and success while ignoring those in need. You treated kindness as weakness and compassion as foolishness. The gift was wasted on you." Those words, more than anything else, broke something inside Amelia. She had spent her entire adult life building what she thought was a legacy. Her name on buildings, her company dominating the city skyline, her wealth ensuring that she would be remembered. But it was all hollow, all empty. Her grandmother, who had died with almost nothing, had created something eternal through a single act of kindness. And Amelia, with all her power and success, had created nothing but monuments to her own ego. She looked at her reflection in the river water, and this time she saw the truth, not the accelerated aging, not the supernatural effect of the shield being withdrawn, but her real face, a face hardened by years of caring only for herself, eyes cold from seeing other people as tools or obstacles, a mouth that had forgotten how to smile with genuine warmth. She had become a monster of her own making, beautiful on the surface perhaps, carefully maintained and expensively adorned, but hollow inside, empty, a perfect shell with nothing of value within. "Goodbye, Amelia." Daniel's voice drew her attention back to him. He was standing at the water's edge now, silhouetted against the rising sun. As she watched, he began to glow with a soft golden light. It wasn't bright or harsh, it was gentle, warm, like candlelight or the glow of a fireplace. The light grew stronger, enveloping him completely, until Amelia had to shield her eyes. When she looked again, he was gone, simply gone. No footprints in the gravel, no disturbance in the air, just empty space where he had stood and the sun rising over the river. Amelia knelt there on the bank for a long time. The sun climbed higher. Early morning joggers passed by on the path behind her. The city woke up, cars and voices and the normal sounds of life beginning another day. But Amelia remained still, kneeling by the river, staring at her reflection. And as she stared, she saw her face age. Not rapidly, not supernaturally, but she saw it. The passage of time, undeniable and unstoppable. The 20 years that had been held back, that she had lived without truly aging, settled onto her face. Wrinkles deepened. Her skin lost its artificial tightness. Grey spread through her hair. The expensive treatments and procedures that had kept her looking young simply faded away, revealed as the temporary illusions they had always been. When she finally stood up and walked back to her car, she was an old woman. Not elderly, not infirm, but old. She looked her true age of 58, with an extra weight of years that came from hard lessons learned too late. The face that looked back at her from the rearview mirror was a stranger's face. Or perhaps it was her real face, finally revealed after decades of hiding behind a mask of youth. The following months were the darkest of Amelia's life. Her business completely collapsed. The investigations revealed enough irregularities to result in heavy fines and forced restructuring. She lost her company. Her investors abandoned her. Her name, once a symbol of success, became a cautionary tale. The mansion, the cars, the jewelry, all of it had to be sold to pay legal fees and settlements. She moved into a small apartment, the kind of place she would have turned her nose up at just a year ago. She was not destitute, but she was no longer wealthy, no longer powerful, no longer Amelia Hartford, the real estate mogul. Just Amelia, a woman in her late 50s with nothing to show for her life but regrets. She spent long days sitting in her small apartment, staring at the walls, replaying every moment of her life and seeing it all differently now. The deals she had been so proud of, she now saw, had often hurt small businesses and displaced families. The empire she had built stood on the backs of people she had never bothered to see as human. Her success had come at the cost of her soul, and she had been too blind to notice until it was too late. But slowly, very slowly, something began to change. It started with a memory. Amelia was walking through the city past a hospital when she stopped. This was the hospital where her grandmother had worked. It was much larger now, modernized and expanded, but it was the same place. On impulse, she went inside. She found an old section of the building, a hallway lined with photographs of past staff members, and there, in a frame near the end of the hall, was her grandmother's picture, a young woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile. Beneath the photo was a small plaque. Margaret Hartford, 1920-1985, nurse friend, angel to those in need. Amelia stood in front of that photograph for a long time. She remembered her grandmother's hands, always busy, always helping. She remembered stories her mother had told her, about how Margaret would often bring home people who had nowhere to go, feeding them, giving them a place to sleep, asking nothing in return. She couldn't help it, Amelia's mother had said once. She saw someone suffering and she had to help. It was just who she was. Who she was. Amelia had never thought about who she was. She had thought about what she wanted to be, what she wanted to have, what she wanted people to think of her. But she had never considered her character, her essential nature, the person she was when all the money and success were stripped away. Looking at her grandmother's photograph, she realized she didn't like the answer. She had become someone her grandmother would have been ashamed of, someone who had taken a precious gift and wasted it on vanity and greed. But standing there in that hospital hallway, Amelia made a decision. It was too late to reclaim the blessing, too late to undo the damage she had caused, but it was not too late to change. It was not too late to become someone different, someone better. She could not honor her grandmother's memory by building towers or making money, but she could honor it by following her grandmother's example, by helping others, by showing the kindness she had failed to show for so many years. The transformation didn't happen overnight. It took time, effort, painful self-examination, and a willingness to completely rebuild herself from the ground up. Amelia sold the last of her expensive possessions. She liquidated her remaining assets. She took the money, several $1 million that remained after all the legal settlements, and she made a choice. She would build something, not for herself, but for others. Not a monument to her success, but a sanctuary for those at the end of their journey. She purchased an old estate on the outskirts of the city. It had once been beautiful but had fallen into disrepair. Using her knowledge of real estate and construction, she transformed it. But this time she didn't hire others to do the work. She rolled up her sleeves and worked alongside the contractors, learning to hammer nails, paint walls, plant gardens. She made mistakes. She broke things. She got blisters on her hands and paint in her hair. And for the first time in decades, she felt truly alive. The result was The Last Kindness, a modern hospice facility. It was not a hospital, cold and clinical. It was a home. A beautiful, warm place where people could spend their final days in comfort and dignity. Large windows let in natural light. Gardens provided peaceful spaces for reflection. The rooms were decorated not like hospital wards, but like bedrooms, each one unique, each one designed to feel safe and personal. There were communal areas where residents could gather, share meals, tell stories. There was a library, a music room, a quiet chapel for those who sought it. And there was staff, carefully chosen not for their medical credentials alone, but for their compassion, their patience, their ability to see the person behind the illness. Amelia didn't just fund the hospice. She worked there. Every day she was present. She learned to change bedding to help patients move from bed to chair, to sit with someone who was frightened or in pain. She learned to listen, truly listen, to the stories people told about their lives. She held hands. She wiped tears. She bore witness to the profound courage it took to face the end with grace. And in serving others, in putting their needs above her own comfort or convenience, she found something she had never experienced in all her years of wealth and power. She found peace. The work was hard. The emotional toll was heavy. Death was a constant presence at The Last Kindness, not as an enemy to be fought, but as a natural transition to be honored. Amelia learned to sit with people in their final hours, to offer comfort without false promises, to celebrate lives well lived and mourn lives cut short. She learned that every person, regardless of their station in life, their achievements or failures, their wealth or poverty, had value, had dignity, had a story worth hearing. One of her first residents was an elderly homeless man named Marcus. He had been found collapsed on a street corner, suffering from advanced cancer with no family and no means to pay for care. A social worker brought him to the Last Kindness because no other facility would take him. Marcus was suspicious at first, defensive, expecting to be judged or turned away. But Amelia sat with him that first evening, and she told him the truth. She told him about Daniel, about the gift she had wasted, about the cruelty she had shown to a man who had sat outside her gates for 20 years. She told him about her grandmother and the legacy of kindness she had failed to honor, and she told Marcus that she could never undo her past, but she could try to do better now. She could try to give others the kindness and dignity she had withheld for so long. Marcus stayed at the Last Kindness for 3 months before he passed. In that time, Amelia learned his story. He had been a teacher once, passionate about literature and poetry. Life had been hard to him. His wife had died young. His daughter had cut off contact years ago. Bad choices and worse luck had led him to the streets. But he still loved poetry. So Amelia brought books to his room. She sat with him in the evenings and they read together. Frost and Whitman and Maya Angelou. When he became too weak to read himself, she read to him. And when he died, peaceful in his sleep with the lamp still on and a book of poems on the nightstand, Amelia wept. Not tears of despair, but tears of gratitude that she had been given the privilege of knowing him, of easing his passage, of honoring his humanity. The years passed. The Last Kindness grew. Word spread about the beautiful hospice where people were treated with genuine care and respect. Donations came in, allowing Amelia to expand, to help more people. But she never lost sight of the mission. This was not a business. This was not about her reputation or her legacy. This was penance and purpose combined. This was her way of honoring her grandmother's memory. This was her attempt to become, even at this late stage of her life, someone worthy of the gift that had been given and lost. Amelia aged naturally now. No more treatments, no more procedures designed to fight time. She let her hair go grey, then white. She let the wrinkles deepen in her face. She earned every line, every age spot, every sign of passing years through honest work and genuine compassion. And strangely, she felt more beautiful now than she ever had when she was fighting to maintain an artificial youth. Because the face that looked back at her from the mirror now was earned. It was real. It reflected a life being lived with purpose. The hospice gardens became her special project. She planted rose bushes, simple varieties that were hardy and resilient. She tended them herself, working in the soil with her bare hands, feeling the earth under her fingernails, learning patience as she waited for blooms to appear in their own time. These roses were not prize winners. They were not perfect. Some were a bit crooked. Some had petals that weren't quite symmetrical, but they were alive. They thrived. And they brought joy to the residents, who could see them from their windows or walk among them on good days. One morning, about 5 years after the Last Kindness opened, Amelia was in the garden early, pruning the roses. The sun was just coming up, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. The air was cool and fresh. Birds were beginning their morning songs. It was, she thought, a perfect moment. Simple and ordinary, and absolutely perfect. She had clipped a particularly nice bloom, a deep red rose with a sweet fragrance, and was thinking about which residence room she would bring it to when she heard a voice behind her. "They're beautiful." Amelia turned. An elderly woman stood on the garden path leaning on a walker. She was new, had only arrived at the Last Kindness 2 days ago. Her name was Dorothy, and she was suffering from heart failure. She had the look of someone who had lived a hard life, her face deeply lined, her hands gnarled with arthritis, but her eyes were bright and sharp. "Thank you," Amelia said, smiling. "Would you like this one for your room?" "That would be lovely," Dorothy said. She moved slowly down the path to where Amelia stood. "You know, I've been in a lot of places these last few years. Hospitals, nursing homes, rehab centers. This is the first place that feels like someone actually cares." "We do care," Amelia said simply. "Every person here matters. Your comfort, your dignity, your story, it all matters." Dorothy studied her for a long moment. "You remind me of someone," she said finally. "A nurse I knew many, many years ago. She had that same quality. Like she really saw you, you know? Like you weren't just another patient or another problem. You were a person." Amelia felt her breath catch. "What was her name, this nurse?" "Margaret," Dorothy said. Margaret Hartford. She worked at City Hospital back in the 50s and 60s. She took care of my mother when she was dying. I was just a teenager then, scared out of my mind. But Margaret, she was so kind. She held my hand. She told me it was okay to be scared, but that my mother wasn't alone and neither was I. I never forgot that. Tears filled Amelia's eyes. Margaret was my grandmother. Dorothy's face lit up with surprise and delight. Was she? Oh, my dear, what a wonderful thing. She was an angel, that woman. An absolute angel. I've thought about her often over the years, especially now that I'm facing my own end. I've tried to live the way she lived, you know, to be kind, to help when I could. It hasn't always been easy, and I haven't always succeeded, but I've tried, because of her example. They talked for a long time that morning, Amelia and Dorothy. They talked about Margaret, about kindness, about the ways that small acts of compassion ripple out through time, touching lives in ways we never see. Dorothy stayed at the last kindness for 6 weeks. In that time, she and Amelia became close. Dorothy told stories about her life, about the people she had helped, the love she had shared, the mistakes she had made and tried to learn from. And when Dorothy finally passed, peaceful and surrounded by people who cared for her, Amelia held her hand. She was there at the end, offering the same comfort her grandmother had offered Dorothy's mother all those decades ago. The circle was complete. More years passed. Amelia grew older. She was in her 70s now, moving slower, tiring more easily, but she continued to work at the hospice every day. It was her life, her purpose, her redemption. She had long ago stopped thinking about her old life, about the empire she had built and lost. That world seemed like a dream now, distant and unreal. This world, the world of the last kindness, was her reality. These people, the residents and staff who had become her family, were what mattered. One evening, as Amelia was making her rounds, checking on residents before night fell, she entered a room at the end of the hall. An elderly man had been admitted that day, brought in by ambulance from a hospital where he had been found unconscious on the street. He had no identification, no family anyone could locate. The doctors estimated he was in his 80s, suffering from pneumonia and extreme malnutrition. They didn't expect him to survive the night. But Amelia had learned that people could be surprisingly resilient, and that even if survival wasn't possible, comfort and dignity always were. She approached the bed quietly. The man was sleeping, his breathing labored but steady. His face was deeply weathered, marked by what must have been a very hard life. But there was something about him, something in the set of his features that seemed familiar. Amelia couldn't place it. She adjusted his blanket, checked his IV, made sure he was comfortable. As she was about to leave, his eyes opened. They were grey, storm cloud grey, ocean grey, exactly the shade she had seen only once before, many years ago, on an early morning by the river. "Daniel," she whispered. The man smiled. It was a gentle smile, filled with warmth, but he shook his head slightly. "No," he said, his voice weak but clear. "My name is Thomas, but I knew Daniel. He was my brother, or what you would call a brother anyway. We're not quite like you." Amelia's hand flew to her mouth. Is Daniel? He's well," Thomas said. "He sent me here. He wanted you to know that he has watched you, that he has seen your transformation, that he is, proud is not quite the right word. Glad, perhaps. Glad that you found your way." "I didn't find my way," Amelia said, tears streaming down her face. "I destroyed everything. I wasted the gift. I was cruel and selfish and blind." "Yes," Thomas agreed simply. "You were all those things. But you learned. You changed. That's rare, Amelia. Most people, when they lose what they value, become bitter. They blame others. They learn nothing. But you looked at yourself honestly. You saw what you had become, and you chose to become something different. That takes courage. That takes character." He reached out a trembling hand and Amelia took it. His skin was paper-thin and cold, but his grip was surprisingly firm. "Your grandmother's gift was never really about time," he said. "It was about giving you the opportunity to become who you were meant to be, to live up to the legacy of kindness she left behind. For many years, you squandered that opportunity, but in the end, you honored it. Not in the way she might have hoped, perhaps, not without pain and loss, but you honored it nonetheless, and that matters." "Will you tell him something for me?" Amelia asked. "Will you tell Daniel that I understand now, that I'm sorry, that I wish I could thank him properly for the gift, even though I wasted so much of it?" Thomas smiled again. "He knows, Amelia. He has always known. That's why he sent me here, to this place. so you could care for me in my final days, so you could close the circle, so you could give to one of us what your grandmother gave all those years ago. Kindness without expectation, care without judgment, love for a stranger who has nothing to offer in return. Thomas stayed at the last kindness for a week. Amelia personally attended to him, making sure he was never alone, never uncomfortable, never afraid. She sat with him in the quiet hours of the night, holding his hand, talking to him about everything and nothing. She told him about her journey, about the person she had been and the person she was trying to become. She told him about the residents she had cared for, the lives she had been privileged to touch. She told him about the roses in the garden and how she had learned that true beauty wasn't about perfection, but about resilience and grace. On the seventh day, as the sun was setting, Thomas took his last breath. Amelia was with him. She had been reading to him from a book of poetry, Marcus's favorite Whitman, when his breathing simply stopped. There was no struggle, no pain, just a gentle transition from one state to another, as natural as falling asleep. Amelia closed the book and sat with him for a while in the gathering darkness. She felt a profound sense of peace, of completion. She had been given a second chance, an opportunity to do right by someone connected to Daniel, to the gift, to her grandmother's legacy. And she had not failed this time. As she stood to leave the room, she noticed something. There on the windowsill was a single white rose. It hadn't been there before. The stem was still fresh, as if it had just been cut. But no one had brought flowers to Thomas's room. Amelia picked up the rose and brought it to her face, breathing in its delicate fragrance. And she knew, without question, that it was a message, a sign that she had been forgiven, that she was on the right path, that the gift in a different form had been restored. The years that followed were the best of Amelia's life, not the easiest, not the most comfortable, but the best. She continued her work at the last kindness, caring for those at the end of their journey, offering them dignity and comfort and compassion. She trained new staff, instilling in them the values her grandmother had lived by. She expanded the facility, creating more space, helping more people. And she lived simply, without luxury, without pride, without the need for recognition or reward. She lived to serve, and in serving she found a joy she had never known existed. She never saw Daniel again, but she felt his presence sometimes, in quiet moments in the garden at dawn, in the peace that settled over the hospice at night. She felt him in the small miracles that happened regularly, the way someone in terrible pain would suddenly find relief, the way family members who had been estranged for years would reconcile at a bedside, the way people who had lived hard, lonely lives would find peace and acceptance at the end. The last kindness was a place touched by grace, and Amelia knew that grace had a source. She aged into her 80s, then her 90s. Her body grew frail, but her spirit remained strong. She moved from being the primary caregiver to being more of a presence, a mentor, a gentle guide for the younger staff who had come to love and respect her. She spent more time in the garden, tending her roses, watching the seasons change, marveling at the way life persisted, bloomed, faded, and bloomed again. On a morning in late spring, when Amelia was 94 years old, she woke feeling different. Not ill exactly, but aware that something had shifted. She rose slowly, dressed herself in her simple clothes and walked out to the garden. The roses were in full bloom, more beautiful than she had ever seen them. The morning sun painted everything gold. Birds sang in the trees. The air smelled of earth and flowers and possibility. Amelia sat on a bench beneath an old oak tree, the same spot where she often sat to watch the sunrise. She felt at peace. She felt complete. She had lived a long life, made terrible mistakes, wasted precious gifts, hurt people through her selfishness and pride. But she had also learned. She had changed. She had spent the last decades of her life trying to make amends, trying to honor the legacy she had almost destroyed. She had helped hundreds of people find dignity and peace at the end of their lives. She had created a place of healing and compassion. She had become, finally, someone her grandmother would have been proud of. As she sat there in the golden morning light, she saw a figure walking toward her through the garden. For a moment, her old eyes couldn't focus, couldn't make out the details, but as the figure came closer, she recognized him. Daniel. He looked exactly as he had all those years ago, young, serene, with those storm-gray eyes full of infinite depth and sadness and wisdom. He sat down beside her on the bench. "Hello, Amelia," he said gently. "Hello, Daniel," she replied. Her voice was calm. She was not afraid. "Have you come for me?" "In a way," he said. "Your time is complete. You have lived your years fully and well. It's time to rest." "I'm ready," Amelia said. And she was. She had no regrets anymore, no unfinished business, no desperate need to cling to life. She had done what she needed to do. She had become who she needed to become. "Daniel, before I go, I need to know, did I do enough? Did I make up for the years I wasted? Did I honor my grandmother's legacy?" Daniel looked at her with those ancient, compassionate eyes. "You honored it perfectly," he said, "not by being perfect yourself, but by learning from your imperfections. Your grandmother's great gift was not just the kindness she showed to one traveler on one winter night. It was the example she set, the ripples she created. You have created your own ripples now, Amelia. The people you have helped, the staff you have trained, the facility you have built, all of it will continue long after you're gone. You have left the world better than you found it. What more can anyone do?" Amelia felt tears of gratitude running down her weathered cheeks. "Thank you," she whispered, "for the gift, for the test, for the second chance, for everything." "The gift was always yours," Daniel said. "We merely guarded it for a time. Your grandmother earned it through her compassion. You reclaimed it through your transformation, and now you pass it on through your legacy. The circle continues." He stood and offered her his hand. Amelia took it. His touch was warm, solid, real. She rose from the bench, and as she did, she felt the weight of years lift from her body. She felt light, free, unburdened. She looked down and saw her old body still sitting on the bench, peaceful, a gentle smile on its face. But she was no longer bound to it. She was something else now. Something lighter, something free. "Will I see her?" Amelia asked. "My grandmother?" "Yes," Daniel said. "She's been waiting for you. She has much to tell you, much to show you, and she is very, very proud." They walked together through the garden, through the golden morning light. The roses bloomed around them, more vibrant and beautiful than any flowers Amelia had seen in life, and as they walked, the garden seemed to expand, to open into something vast and bright and infinitely beautiful. Amelia looked back once at the last kindness, at the place that had been her redemption and her joy. She saw the staff arriving for the morning shift. She saw residents sitting at windows enjoying the sunrise. She saw the roses she had planted continuing to bloom, and she knew that her work would continue, that the seeds of compassion she had planted would continue to grow and spread. She turned back to Daniel and smiled. "I'm ready," she said, and together they stepped into the light. The last kindness continues to operate to this day. It has become one of the most respected hospice facilities in the country, a model for compassionate end-of-life care. In the garden, there is a small bronze plaque beneath the oak tree where Amelia used to sit. It reads, "In memory of Amelia Hartford, 1963-2057. She learned that true wealth is measured not in what we accumulate, but in what we give away. She discovered that real beauty is found not in fighting time, but in embracing grace. She understood finally that the greatest legacy we can leave is a life of kindness and compassion. May we all learn as she learned. May we all love as she loved." And beside the plaque, a single white rosebush blooms year-round, defying seasons, never wilting, never fading. The staff say it appeared the morning after Amelia died, fully grown, as if it had always been there. Some say it's just a particularly hardy variety, but those who knew Amelia, who understood her story, know better. It's a reminder, a symbol, a promise that kindness is never forgotten, that transformation is always possible, and that even the gifts we lose through our own foolishness can be reclaimed through genuine change and dedicated service to others. So we must ask ourselves, what gifts have we overlooked? What blessings have we taken for granted? Who are the people we walk past every day without truly seeing? And what would it take for us to open our eyes, to recognize the sacred in the ordinary, to show kindness to those who have nothing to offer us in return? Because the truth is, we never know when we might be entertaining angels unaware. We never know when the stranger at our gates might be carrying a gift we desperately need. Amelia's story is not just about a wealthy woman who lost everything and found redemption. It's about all of us. It's about the choices we make every single day, the small cruelties we justify, the acts of kindness we postpone, the people we see as inconveniences, rather than as human beings with their own stories, their own struggles, their own sacred worth. Amelia was given a gift and wasted it for decades. But she was also given something else, time to learn, to change, to become someone better. Not everyone gets that opportunity. Not everyone takes it when they do. The question is, what will you do with the time you have? Will you build monuments to yourself or bridges to others? Will you hoard your blessings or share them generously? Will you see the people around you as tools for your advancement or as fellow travelers deserving of dignity and compassion? The choice, as it always has been, is yours. But choose wisely, because time moves forward for all of us. And the gifts we receive, the blessings we're given, can be withdrawn when we prove ourselves unworthy. But they can also be reclaimed. Redemption is always possible. Change is always within reach. It's never too late to become who you were meant to be. If this story has touched your heart, if it has made you think about your own life, your own choices, your own relationships with the people around you, then please, share it. Leave a comment telling us what resonated with you, what lessons you're taking away, what changes you're going to make in your own life. Tell us your city, your story, your own experiences with unexpected kindness or missed opportunities, and subscribe to this channel because we will continue to share stories that inspire, that challenge, that remind us of our shared humanity and our capacity for transformation. Stories that show us that hope can be found in the most unexpected places and that grace is always available to those brave enough to reach for it. Remember Amelia. Remember Daniel. Remember that the greatest gifts often come disguised as challenges, that the most important tests are the ones we don't realize we're taking, and that true legacy is not measured in buildings or bank accounts, but in the lives we touch and the kindness we share. Go forth and be the change you wish to see. Honor the gifts you've been given, see the sacred in the ordinary, and never ever underestimate the power of a simple act of compassion, because you never know when that act might be the beginning of someone's transformation or your own.